Yo, let's go and welcome to the video. My guild is hard stuck on Muru right now. The roster boss is defeating us. So I'm saving that video until we get it down. But for now, I will do a video on Kil'jaeden using some tips and advice from Chimse. They had the rank 1 parse about a week ago when I reached out to them for some tips. And they're from Vietnam, so there's a bit of a language barrier, so we didn't really have a voice interview, but I'll try to use some clips from Joardee's KJ guide and just do a little voiceover with the tips from Chimse. Alright, so starting off with phase 1, I asked, were they using any cooldowns or trying to save mana during this first phase, because these 3 mobs don't count towards your parse. Your DPS doesn't start until KJ spawns. So I was wondering how they were handling these ads. They said that they're not even using Moonfire, just Starfire. So that probably helps with mana a little bit. So they're still doing some damage, not just ignoring them like the ads between phases of ROS. You do actually have to still do damage to these even though they don't count towards your parse. And the second question I asked was, can you shift out of the Mind Flay or Soul Flay and break it? We're able to do that on some of the trash mobs. Shift out and not take any damage. But you said it doesn't do much damage, that they would just keep casting, but also they think that it mainly just goes on the tanks. Whoever's number 1 on the threat meter. So I guess he just got healing aggro since KJ just spawned, so he must have just been on the top of the threat meter. That's why he got that Soul Flay. So you shouldn't have to worry about it. And for the third question I asked, when are they using their Destro pot? Because it looked like as soon as KJ spawned, they were using a Destro pot, but there wasn't a heroism with it. And they said, right after putting up Fairy Fire using Treants, that because they're using heroism about 2 minutes into the fight, once the cooldowns are going to be back up, he does pop cooldowns right at the start of the fight. It is going to vary guild to guild, when you guys are popping your lust and everything like that. So during the fight, KJ will spawn some reflections, and they don't activate until they have damage done to them. So you try to avoid doing any damage to them until the tank gets them. And even then, I was wondering, why aren't they hurricaning these ads? And they're just leaving the damage to the reflections to the warlocks. Hurricane costs lots of mana. Trying to do damage on the reflections is just gonna hurt your mana bar. So I looked at the buffs that they got during the fight, and they had 6 of the haste buffs and 5 of the mana regen buffs. And they also were able to keep their own innervate. I was wondering if we should maybe use mana pots the first couple attempts while we're progressing, or can we start off using Destro pots? And it seems like with all other long fights, as long as we have our innervate, we shouldn't really have mana issues. Of course, we're gonna have to fight our mages in order to keep our innervate. I have a 1 week on, 1 week off right now with my mage, so hopefully that goes well. So 1 week I'll use mana pots if I'm not keeping my innervate, and then the other week I will use Destro pots. But at least that first one, as soon as KJ spawns, I'll try to use a Destro and then mana pot throughout the fight if needed. But hopefully whoever's doing our dragons is able to use this Revitalize Breath on wherever I'm at in the raid, so I can get lots of this mana back. And while we were talking about mana, I didn't see that they downranked at all. No rank 6 Starfires, it was all max rank Starfires. And it was because, they had their innervate and didn't have much of a mana issue. So hopefully we don't have to downrank. Still going to be an option, of course, figuring out how our own personal mana is going to feel with or without innervate, but it definitely seems plausible to not have to downrank at all. And for their trinkets, they used Quag's Eye and Ash Tongue, but that was only because they didn't have Skull of Gul'dan yet, so they would use Skull and Ash or Quags, but ideally, Skull and the Sliver for maximum DPS. And that was all the questions I could think of after looking at logs and Joardee's guide. But they also added that we can use Barkskin if we have the Fire Bloom, so that we won't be getting pushed back every 2 seconds and lose a lot of damage. Only if it's cast on you, not if it's on somebody nearby, and you just have to run a little bit away. But yeah, any movement during this fight, just use an Insect Swarm. So that's it for now. Huge shout out to Chimse for all of the advice. I can't wait to get to this boss fight. If you've already gotten to KJ, and you have another piece of advice to help throw out there for everybody else, please leave a comment down below. And since it's out of order, I will see you back at Muru. Oh yeah, and while I'm running to do some jump runs, I do plan on going back and revisiting this boss fight and the entirety of Sunwell in a couple of weeks, once all of the bosses in our guild are on farm. So I apologize I don't have video footage to use for this fight, but I wanted to get the video posted in case there are some that have already downed KJ that had some other advice that they could post, just so this could be a place where you can come back to and check for advice. As always, join the Discord. There's a channel for Sunwell. Anytime I find like a tip for trash or something like that, I'm posting it in that channel. That's another place that you could go check and try to stay on top of the current strategies. But thanks again for watching, and it's time for me to farm some rich thorium veins. Woohoo!